Richard Virenque, this was his plan for the day, to get an early move, get some time, and then race for the finish like a rabbit. And he's got him onto the climb with a lead of just over 7.5 minutes. Now, with that gap at 5 minutes and 10 seconds, he's about 10.5 kilometers from the summit. He's left himself a chance.
He has a chance. He's a climber. And once you've been a climber, you always have that ability in your legs to stay clear off the front of the main field. He now will try and find as much courage as possible. He's looking over his shoulder to see if he has opened the gap between himself and Alexander Bocharov. As we pull back there, you can see that he has slowly but surely started to increase the distance between him and the Russian. There is the Russian right now, and the Russian takes on board a drink. A little professional acceleration there for the Russian, but that's not going to help him too much in the picture, the long picture of this whole climb up to the summit of Mont Ventoux.
He's already 1 minute behind Richard Virenque. It is amazing how fast you lose time when the elastic snaps, Paul. 1 minute back to that man.
When you go on the slopes of a mountain like this. Virenque now is looking for all of his courage to try and get himself to the summit of the climb. But there is the group of the yellow jersey of Lance Armstrong. And looking down on the group, we can see Armstrong. Beloki is in there, Acevedo is there, Rumsas is on the left-hand side, the white jersey there is Ivan Basso, Santiago Botero is there as well, Francisco Mancebo is also there for Ibanesto.com. So all of the American challenges for Lance Armstrong have disappeared today again on the slopes of the mountains, and again another acceleration coming from Acevedo, trying to put pressure on Armstrong, but look at the ease that Armstrong came across as they go past Thor Hushovd.
Well, this is the second time he stretched the team. He lost Igor González de Galdeano in the first attack. At least Beloki has hung on. I think Beloki is actually riding very, very well indeed here. He's just going to follow Lance Armstrong, but he's got to go for him sooner or later if he wants to. And no longer on the back after that acceleration is the Colombian. So Botero has gone.
Well,
there he is. No, yes, he is.
Hushovd going backwards, but also behind them is Mancebo, and I think even further back is Santiago Botero. So that acceleration really has caused a serious gap in this group now. The gap again reducing in numbers all of the time. Armstrong looks very comfortable. Rumsas is riding a superb Tour de France. He starts the day in 4th position, and I think by the end of this afternoon he will find himself in a podium position in 3rd spot, because Igor González de Galdeano was left behind quite a few kilometers ago. Ivan Basso is the man making up 5th position there in the white jersey. This is the best young rider of this year's Tour de France, and what a brilliant performance by him over the last few days.
Well, we're looking down at 5 men here, 5 men from 180 that were there just about 10 kilometers ago. Botero is still hanging in the distance there. So it's 2 and 2. So teammates of Armstrong, Heras has gone, so it's 2 against 1 now. As we look at the leader here, Richard Virenque still living high and looking good. 4 minutes 15 seconds. The accelerations of Acevedo has closed down the gap that little bit more. But Virenque will find, if he can hang on this section through the woods, he might have a chance of succeeding in the open landscape. There is Heras here. Now, he took one look at our camera, and that wasn't the sort of look we expected. I think today he's paying the price.
He's paying the price. He's had a hard time. He's worked hard for Armstrong throughout of the Pyrenees, and nobody can be surprised that on one or other day in the mountains he'd have a bad occasion. Now there's the move there coming, and again Acevedo trying to dislodge Armstrong.
This is the best chance since the Tour de France came in the mountains for Once to strike at Lance Armstrong. He's on his own, isolated now. Heras has gone just moments ago, and there are 2 Once riders here. We do not know what Rumsas either is capable of, because this man has only followed so far, and he sits in 4th place in the Tour de France. Here is Óscar Sevilla. He too has been dropped now and is hanging on in there. Former white hope as well of the Tour de France. We're finding this race particularly difficult.
Best young rider in the Tour de France last year comes this year with high hopes of getting himself into a top 3 place in Paris. The odds are now against Armstrong, but only numerically, I would say, because when we look down at the final kilometers of this stage this afternoon, it's not going to be a question of tactics. It's going to be all a question of performance. It's going to be all physical on the last 5 kilometers. Armstrong nice and relaxed. This is Santiago Botero at the back of the race, arrière de la course. He is having a very difficult time just trying to keep his his huge gear ticking over.
And look at this, his teammates coming up. Botero in big trouble here now. His teammate, Óscar Sevilla, there was a big discussion as to who will be the team captain of this squad. Well, now they're both behind, as it looks as though Sevilla is climbing better right now. This man still hanging on, Richard Veron, 4 minutes 12 seconds, the last time check we have, at 9 kilometers from the finish. It is still just on 30 seconds a kilometer. He has to concede.
Well, his position and his pedaling action is very good right now. It still looks fluid. He's still getting out of the saddle when the steep part of the gradient kicks into his thighs, keeping the tempo as high as possible. He has to be very concentrated right now because he's a great chance of surviving, the only man. And I actually didn't give him that much of a chance a few kilometers ago because I had a feeling after 180 kilometers at the front of the bike race he would have dead legs when he came to this climb. But right now he is riding alone in front of a group which is becoming the very elite group of the Tour de France, the group with Lance Armstrong, Basso, Rumsas and Joseba Beloki. The only man in here doing the work for Beloki is Acevedo, wears number 22. But this is a group which will probably fight out the top 3 positions. This is Stéphane Ogier. He was a member of the 11-man break earlier on. He now gets a chance for a ringside seat of the top men of the Tour.
Well, he gets to see just how quick they climb towards the end of the stage. He's going to try. No, I don't think there's any more legs left there now. He'll rise steadily to the finish. It's been a long day up front for him, almost 200 kilometers away from the peloton. 81 is Basso. I don't need to tell you who number 1 is in that yellow jersey. Still looking very good and keeping an eye on the man he wants to control, Joseba Beloki, number 21. He's only just over 2 minutes to the good over Beloki. And Lance is always the first man to tell you this race is not won yet. And Ogier hanging on for the minute at least. And here's the next man coming back, and this is the faster Bortolo rider now, who is falling back. So this will be Marco Velo in the breakaway earlier. They're now coming back. This will give heart to the Armstrong group, knowing they're picking them off one by one. But there's still one rider, the one rider that they would expect to catch last is Richard Veron. And he's coming down. It's now 4 minutes and 10 seconds. Here he is.
Team management coming up alongside. They will give him as much encouragement as possible, but this man will get an awful lot of encouragement from the people at the side of the road because he has produced some incredible exploits on the roads of the Tour over the last many years. Virenque has been quite an animator of any of the mountain stages, whether they were stages in the Pyrenees or in the Alps. And right now he would very much love to win here because this is probably the closest mountain he could really get to home ground. He's a Provençal himself. He comes from in between Marseille and Toulon. And right now his pedaling field looks pretty good, and he might well just cause the big surprise of the day, because I don't think anybody thought Virenque would win here.
Well, this is a man of surprises. He's riding his 10th Tour de France. He first came to our notice in 1992, 10 years ago, when nobody had ever heard of him, and he got the yellow jersey in the Tour de France. And that was the turning point of his career. He's only a youngster coming through. He finished 25th in his first Tour de France, and since then he's won the King of the Mountains on 5 occasions. Beloki, looking as though he's never been up to under stress yet. Acevedo's turning out to be quite a teammate today. Situation's turning a little bit because it was Roberto Heras looking after Armstrong in the 2 days in the Pyrenees. Now here we are in the Alps, rather in Provence, very close to the Alps. Once trying to take control. This is the best chance they've had, and it's up to Armstrong if he's got the strength to handle them on the end of the climb. Francisco Mancebo from Benesto. He was with that elite group, but he's now being dropped. But hanging on at the moment, he hasn't lost that much ground. There they are. In fact, this is a turnabout, Paul. Mancebo has come back to the group. So that's a fine piece of riding. I don't think he had a mechanical problem. I think he just, on the steeper parts of Ventoux, felt the pace too much. But it's leveled a little bit. We're heading up towards Charlieu-Renard, which is the little outpost on Mont Ventoux. It's about the only building there is halfway up, which is a welcome sight in the winter, of course, because they usually close the rest of Mont Ventoux because of snow. Smile, you're on candid camera there, with the camera looking at the bike riders. Armstrong, 4:53. If anything, they are beginning to lose ground to Richard Virenque.
The only reason they're losing ground is because the man in yellow right now has not launched any kind of attack. The actual race situation for the moment, Virenque is actually just leading Botiro by 25 seconds. And you see in the steep corners, he gets out of the saddle to try and keep his tempo as high as possible. Third place on the road is still Serpellini. He's 40 seconds behind Richard Virenque right now. Baranovski fading for the moment. He's a minute 35 behind on the road. Pradera is almost caught by the yellow jersey group. He's at 3 minutes, and the yellow jersey group of Lance Armstrong and Beloki is at 4 minutes 50 seconds. But right now, it looks as if Richard Virenque is starting to show the first signs of weakness and fatigue.
There's a nice view of the top of Mont Ventoux. You can see it for over 150 kilometers on a clear day around France. And right at the highest point is where we are sat and where the riders are coming towards us. You see now the area of the deforestation of Mont Ventoux, which was done over 400 years ago, and it's never recovered. And that's another scarring of our planet by man, but it was done to build the ships, which were made, of course, from wood in those days. Now back with the Tour de France, which climbs up now. Stéphane Ogier has gone. They're all going now as they drop away. This is Marco Velo further up. He's also in trouble. We're picking them up one by one, and then they hang on for a little while, and then they drop off the back. But look at this on the right-hand side of the road.
This is Ivan Gotti now. This is a man we haven't spoken about since the race started an awful long time ago. He's making a pretty impressive comeback, and so is Levi Leipheimer. The orange, blue and white jersey of the man from Rabobank. He was dropped a few moments ago, but because there is no super huge battle going on here for the yellow jersey, Leipheimer has been able to recover.
They've definitely slowed down because Virenque is holding at 4:52 at the moment, and this has allowed Levi Leipheimer back into the race, and well done to Levi for that return. Tremendous piece of cycling by him, but it's indicating that with Armstrong and his team not there to set the pace, the other boys haven't got the power to start bringing back Richard Virenque. Armstrong has no reason to attack at this point, has he? Because if he did, he might destroy himself and fall right into the arms of Joseba Beloki.
Well, Richard Virenque right now not very far away from Chalais-Renard, and from this point onwards he goes out, and there's a move here. This is Beloki at last, and Armstrong has to respond to this one.
Well, you've got to take your hat off to the Spaniard. He said he felt he was good enough to attack Armstrong in the mountains. Now we've got the Spanish-American tandem, and Armstrong says, you do it to me and I'll do it to you. And he's reacted immediately now, and you never ruffle the feathers of the American, because I don't think Beloki has the legs now.
Well, don't play with me, that's what he said. The move came from Joseba Beloki. It was a good move, a violent attack, and immediately Armstrong responded. He's coming up. This is the man who was in the breakaway a few moments ago, Pradera. He can only look and see what's happening. He will see his team leader behind him. He will try and recover to pace him for a few moments, but that's not going to happen right now. Armstrong would have been content to sit there and ride to the summit in the company of those other guys, but once the attack came, he had to launch the counter-attack. The newspapers, by the way, are creating a new nickname for Lance Armstrong, the Cannibal. And the last man given that nickname was Sean Kelly, but the first man given the nickname Cannibal was Eddie Merckx.
Yes, indeed. Eddie is now a television commentator here and watching Beloki. Well, I salute Beloki for the way he attacked, but Armstrong was waiting for it all to happen, and he just went straight by him. Now, Beloki has caught up here with a teammate, Pradera. I don't think Pradera, though, has the strength to help him. Armstrong now is free to fly, and can he fly quick enough to bring back Richard Virenque as they progress towards the summit? I think there are still a couple of riders in front, Alexander Botiro and Marco Serpellini. I haven't noticed them come back, but now Armstrong is racing, and it's all on a win here, and with every pedal rev he is going to get seconds more over Joseba Beloki. Look at the crowd now. They've been standing here and enjoying the surface of Mont Ventoux, known to the locals as the Moon, for the last 2 days.
Well, this is unbelievable. This is going to be a huge man-against-man battle. There are still one or two riders caught in between Richard Virenque on the left-hand side, the leader on the road right now, and Lance Armstrong. He still has to catch Baranovski, and he still has to catch Serpellini. But this is how he launched the attack. The man who wears 21 was the first to move in the pink jersey. Armstrong came to his wheel and immediately went over the top of him. An unbelievable counter-attack, but now it is going to be a question of setting the tempo, which is his. That cadence is unbelievable. He ticks over those pedals. This cadence, by the way, is something that he's worked at over the last few years, and he's even in the Dauphiné Libéré, Phil, on the slopes of this climb, taken out a couple of tests just to see whether he was better at the lower cadence or the higher one.
I guess it was been a low one, I'm not sure, but he's pedaling away in front, but I don't know. But as we look behind, they've all regrouped and they've all had water poured over them, but they are making now no impression on Armstrong. I think the only question that remains today is, can he catch the riders in front and finish a brilliant day in the mountains again and win at the stage and increase his lead, of course.
Well, this is it. This is the moment, and he's knocked already 15 seconds off the advantage of Richard Virenque. Virenque right now is 6 kilometers from the finishing line, and Armstrong has to beat him by 40 seconds for every kilometer. Now that is a tough call, even if your name is Lance Armstrong, but I really think this man can do it, because once you get out of the crowd here up to the open part of this course, it is roasting hot at the summit of this climb. There is the man who leads the bike race this afternoon, Richard Virenque, 5 times a winner of the King of the Mountains competition, and a great man when it has come to the Tour de France over many years. Today, if he wins this, I think he will put this down as one of his greatest escapes.
5 kilometers to go for Richard. He can now see the finish, but it is 3 miles away, over to the left of our pictures actually. But Richard is climbing very, very quickly and looking superb, but these legs are spinning so quickly. He must be eating into the lead of the few riders who remain in front. Botiro is still ahead, but I think Serpellini has long since passed by, but I didn't see him. But now with a sharp left turn here now, this is a Chaly Renard, as Lance Armstrong, without Marco Pantani, as was the case 2 years ago, is now free to catch Richard Virenque if he can.
Well, just to answer your question a little moment ago, you said you weren't sure which Lance had found to be the most efficient. Well, he did a test at 75 revolutions a minute pedaling here and at 100 revolutions a minute. It didn't affect his heart rate at all. It was almost identical, only 2 beats different, and it also saved and left his power at exactly the same level. But what it does is it makes his pedaling action much more economical. He's able to make efforts like this on a much more regular basis. That is why over the years he's come back and trained specifically to be able to speed along at this unbelievable cadence. It is an incredible thing that he's learned and trained himself to do, and not everyone can do it, because Jan Ullrich has tried this system and he just cannot.
It is frightening to watch Armstrong ride at the moment. This man is superhuman. He is chasing down now the leader on the road. We're waiting for the next time check. We haven't got one yet. We think it is just on 4 seconds. The watch is running, 4 minutes rather. The watch is running. Lance is running out of time. There is the crowd. Just look at this crowd. We are standing in the middle of nowhere, and there are thousands upon thousands of people witnessing a fantastic stage on the Tour de France. And how they climb a mountain, Paul, at 22 kilometers an hour, it beats me.
It's absolutely incredible. This man is just ticking away right now. He's on a mission, because you know what? He wants to win this stage this afternoon. He knows he's got a tall order to try and pull back Richard Virenque, but around about 4 minutes in front of him, and there is the breakdown of the race right now. On the front, Richard Virenque. Behind him is Botiro. Behind him, still surviving, is Serpellini. But very rapidly, Serpellini will be passed by the man who wears number 1, Lance Armstrong. It's getting tough for Virenque right now, but he still has a certain amount of fluidity left in that pedaling style, but it's still going to get very tough.
Australian running alongside him on the right there, shouting encouragement to Richard Virenque at 3:50. The banners are coming at Richard Virenque, quick and fast now. Another kilometre ticked off, 4 to go. The time gap at the last kilometre banner is 3 minutes 50 seconds. It is going to be touch and go now. We're looking at the gloves here of Lance Armstrong. I don't know whether he's just trying to hold his bike on the ground there, because he's going so quickly up this mountain. There are 3 riders, as far as we can work out, still in front of him.
This is unbelievable to watch this pedaling action of the man who is walking away with the Tour de France at the moment. It's a completely different style to that of Richard Virenque. Virenque's style right now reminds me of a former teammate of mine, Robert Albon. He finished third overall in the Tour de France, but he was a climber like this, longiligne like Richard Virenque, always out of the saddle, battling with his machine, looking for any amount of strength just to keep the gears ticking by. Compare that with Armstrong, who sits firmly on his machine and ticks over the pedals at 100 revolutions for every 1 minute.
Well, Baranowski is still in the frame somewhere down the line. They're talking of him being at 3 minutes 15. I'm just wondering if they've confused him with Botiro, but we'll find out, I'm sure, as Lance Armstrong continues his ascension of the mountain here. To the applause of the crowd, this champion for 3 years of the Tour de France and soon to be crowned for a 4th year, because there's no doubt he is a man riding in his own atmosphere as he races up the climb. He continues now. Richard Virenque is hanging on. Armstrong is still 3 minutes 50 behind at the 5-kilometre banner.
These men are separated by around about 1 kilometre on the road. Armstrong is looking superb. He may well have left it just a little bit too late to close down on Richard Virenque, but look what waits ahead. Those are the final 4 kilometres of the Mont Ventoux this afternoon, and Virenque coming again to one of the steeper gradients here, getting down into the saddle, just trying to keep the body going, just trying to find the strength to keep his pedals going round, because this man has been away for 195 kilometres on today's stage, and he's hoping to survive for just 4 more. 3 minutes and 43 seconds to Lance Armstrong, and it's in these portions here that Armstrong will eat away 20, 30, 40 seconds for every 1 kilometre of climbing left.
Well, the crowd extraordinarily quiet as they spot the maillot jaune on the ascension here, as he concentrates on keeping that cadence up to the required revs per minute. Armstrong just looking at a point in front on the road and just concentrating on his speed. He knows that no one now behind him is staying with him. We drop back a little bit. Here is Rumsas, Basso, Acevedo, and the other rider there with him is Beloki, as just latching on the back two we have Mancebo now. But he's done well to hang on as they continue through this crowd. They are dropping away from the action. Lance Armstrong, the camera's going right in on his face. He looks so cool and so, well, just not stressed at all.
No stress at all, just concentration for this man. The group of Beloki, by the way, is 4 minutes 45 seconds behind Richard Virenque. That makes them almost 1 minute behind Lance Armstrong for the moment. So Armstrong once again extending his lead in the overall classification. But what he really wants to do, Phil, I think, is catch this man, Richard Virenque, who's trying to win himself the stage at the Mont Ventoux. But what a performance.
Well, there are plenty of Americans there to shout for Lance as he continues up the col. He has a minute now clear of his second place rider overall, who is still second overall, by the way, in the Tour, Joseba Beloki, because none of these riders around him are getting rid of Beloki. Rumsas there, content to be riding to a great finish in Paris, but it won't be the winning finish for sure. As now we see Lance Armstrong continue his ascension of Mont Ventoux. 2 years ago, he was with Marco Pantani. Pantani won the stage by courtesy of Armstrong. I think Armstrong has ruled the day for that. And now this rider here, Richard Virenque, knew that the only way to have any chance of beating Armstrong was to break early on and gain a 10-minute advantage. He did that, and he might yet have done the ride of the day to get the win.
Well, whatever you think about Richard Virenque and whatever he's done in the past, today he's proving that he's riding this mountain on absolute courage. This is the difficult part of the course here as we go back to the group. In fact, this is Armstrong catching Baranowski there. Baranowski, one of the early leaders, the 11-man breakaway that at one stage had 12.5 minutes advantage over the main field, and he's hoping for a few moments to ride up alongside the yellow jersey, but I'm sure he won't be able to accept this tempo for very much longer.
Well, it was Baranowski. We've still got Botiro and Serpellini somewhere in the mix. We haven't seen them for ages. Our cameras are spread over the Ventoux now. You can see this barren scenery here as the riders just sit on the edge of the escarpment, twisting and turning like a helter-skelter up towards the summit of Mont Ventoux, the giant of Provence. And that's where the finish is as we pull back now, and we see Lance Armstrong, the flotilla of motorbikes, and Baranowski already has departed.
Well, he looked at a ringside seat, but not for very long at all, because the speed and the tempo there of Armstrong is unbelievable and impossible to follow. For the moment, Armstrong has increased his advantage in the overall classification of the Tour de France by at least 1 minute to Joseba Beloki, Rumsas and the other men in that chasing group.
Well, the crowd now, as we see, first of all, Richard Virenque cutting his way through this public, continuing to keep himself going here by jumping out of the saddle. He still has a great chance of a great victory here. He's won stages in all of the big towns that have mountains, Morzine, Courchevel, Cauterets, and in the Pyrenees, Luzardidon. But he's never won here before at Mont Ventoux. You can see by the wind pause, he comes in from the left, but because they twist so much, there's no real wind direction. It could be cross, head and tail. 2 kilometers to go for Virenque. He's got a real chance now, although Armstrong is still closing in. And what's more important, Beloki on the far side is now more than a minute behind Armstrong.
That gap is increasing all of the time, but his teammate here is doing an excellent job. This is Michael Pradera. He's recovered. He was in the breakaway earlier on this afternoon, and he now is looking for some kind of resources to pace his team leader just a little bit closer to Lance Armstrong. Armstrong is riding away with the Tour de France here. There are a huge amount of American spectators here, but I think the incredible thing, Phil, about cycling supporters is they're cheering every man on the slopes of this climb here. It doesn't matter whether Richard Virenque is a Frenchman, the Germans, the French and the Belgians and the Dutch. They're all chasing and supporting these men for the phenomenal physical effort that they're putting in.
Perhaps with that shot towards the summit you can get some idea, and it is only some idea, as just how steep Mont Ventoux is. And Armstrong, even though his chain is at the bottom of the gear frame here, just seems to conquer it with great ease. The French flag and the Spanish flag, and they're watching an American here desperately try to scramble up to the leader. He's not going to do it, I don't think, today. This man is suffering now like he's never suffered in a Tour de France before, and he knows the win will mean so much to him and indeed so much to France.
Be a huge win for Richard Virenque and his team Domo Farm Freaks, which next year will be combining together with the Lotto squad of Belgium. Lance Armstrong right now is riding basically the same tempo as Richard Virenque, because they're separated on the road by 3 minutes and 13 seconds. This man, in fact, is doing the ride of his life this afternoon, because if you look at the concentration on Armstrong's face there, Phil, it is an absolute picture of concentration. He's tapping out the pedals, keeping his pace as high as possible, riding at a mere 17 miles an hour on this climb.
Well, there's 11 riders had the chance of winning the stage at the bottom of the climb. They all got blown away by Virenque, all picked up by the men behind. It looks as though Pradera is now being dropped as he now cracks, and Beloki is also shaky. Well, this is amazing. Beloki tried desperately. He's paying the price here now. Rumsas could well be looking for a higher place in Paris than we thought, because he's still up there.
And look at that ride by Pradera. He'd been dropped and he saw his team leader in difficulty, and he dug even deeper. He pulled himself forward and he's going to try and pace him back to Rumsas. Rumsas is looking at climbing up to second place in the overall standings this afternoon. He's a long way down on Joseba Beloki, but with performances like that over the next couple of days, it's going to be very dramatic in the Alpine passes. Armstrong is still riding. I don't think he's got enough time out on the road to pull back Richard Virenque, because Richard Virenque has still got to pull himself up there. Virenque right now, the top half of his body is singing out in pain to him, saying please stop, but he won't, because he can see as Armstrong goes under the 2 kilometer banner, Richard Virenque is under the 1,000 meter sign.
Well, he may have judged it absolutely to perfection here, because the old legs have gone now. They are on automatic pilot at 1 kilometer to go, but he's probably got the gap that will win in the stage, and you've got to admire the man for that. It was a breakaway of more than 200 kilometers for Virenque to get the victory on Ventoux. He is surviving. Armstrong is coming, but not quick enough now. But the good news for Armstrong is everybody near him in the overall classification is hating Mont Ventoux and losing time.
And even the Basques at the side of the road, they come all the way up here from the Pyrenees to see this incredible race. And here under pressure is Joseba Beloki. The pressure has come from Raimundas Rumsas, the man who started the day in 4th place in the overall standings, and still with Rumsas, in fact, is Ivan Basso. So he too is doing himself a brilliant job. This is Francisco Mancebo. He has also been dropped behind, and what had looked like total domination by the Spanish teams and the Spanish-speaking riders is crumbling today on the slopes of the Mont Ventoux. Rumsas here is doing an absolutely brilliant job, and so too is Basso.
Well, Rumsas in his first Tour de France, but he's not an unknown rider to us in any way. He's a good classic rider, I have to say, has found the legs we've never seen he's had before. He's having a wonderful ride. He does speak some English as well, by the way, but now we're looking at Armstrong here continuing his ascent as the crowd is getting extremely twitchy at the finishing line, getting also, I've never seen a crowd like this on the climb of Mont Ventoux as Richard Virenque races to the tower now as if drawn like a magnet to the pole. He is going up towards the summit, a fully deserving stage winner today. He's done it the hard way. He must earn the applause of everyone.
It hurts, Phil. It hurts this man right now. He knows he's got the chance of winning. He knows he just has to keep the tempo going for maybe just 2 more minutes as he gets closer to the summit of this unbelievable mountain in the center of Provence. Whenever the pain gets too much, he gets out of the saddle to try and keep the gears ticking by. It has hurt him for the last 45 minutes here, but he knows he's got a chance. Look at his face, he's gasping for breath. The air here is rarefied at 6,000 feet in altitude, but this man is producing an incredible effort, and it really is more incredible by the fact that he escaped after 20 kilometers of the day. Normally a climber attacks on the final climb of the day, but this victory he's going to get here is one that he's gone out and worked very hard for.
Virenque is coming to the summit of Mont Ventoux in the twilight of his cycling career. He's coming to his 5th stage win in his 10th Tour de France. He's conquered the mountains of France over those 10 years, but this conquering of this mountain will undoubtedly be the finest victory of his career. He's been the king of the mountains 5 times. He's lost all chance of that title this time around. He now joins the great names of Charlie Gaulle, Raymond Poulidor, Eddy Merckx, Bernard Thévenet, Jean-François Bernard, Marco Pantani, and now you can add the name of Richard Virenque.
Well, he's been a great climber throughout his career. You don't win the King of the Mountains on 6 separate occasions without being great. And that little victory salute there, slightly reminiscent of the one in Courtrai and Courchevel many years ago. But this one, I think, will probably be the sweetest because he probably didn't even expect it.
A little gold chain around his neck carries a small bicycle. The big bicycle brought him to the summit today. It's really, really steep, that final corner. It's where Lance said to Pantani, you can win the stage 2 years ago. Well, this time this man has earned it in his own right. 200 kilometers in the lead, and victory for Richard Virenque in the grand style of the Tour de France.
Well, that was courage, Phil. The last 5 kilometers that this man rode were on sheer guts and courage, because he can't have had very much left in his body at all there. The leader of his team at the start, a difficult ride through the Pyrenees, 2 tough Pyrenean stages, but he got himself the win. Armstrong, though, is doing a great job himself. It's a solitude here, the lone ride of Armstrong up the slopes of the Mont Ventoux at the moment, and what he is doing is increasing time over everybody else in the overall classification.
But in second place, a Russian rider today, Alexander Botiro of AG2R, another French team. He grits his teeth on what is one of the steepest sectors of the course. He's allowed to freewheel those last couple of meters at about 1 minute 57. But now, as we look backwards, Armstrong was coming. The mountain just not quite long enough. But this champion of the Tour de France has ripped the legs off all of his main adversaries again, and still he pedals this remarkable low gear. He's going to save or gain more minutes now on the rest as he comes in at 2 minutes 19 seconds. Now this is Rumsas, another outstanding performance by this Lithuanian. And he needs the seconds, and he knows it. He will fight to the line. Seconds could make the difference in Paris. He's got to fight and squeeze them out now, because advantage in the time trial might be his. He comes in at 3:36. Basso at 3:38 for 6th place. This will be Mancebo now coming up to the line too, the other young Spanish rider who's had a great Tour de France so far. It has hurt everybody. Now Beloki racing for 8th place, as Joseba knows now every second is putting him further behind Armstrong in the race. He comes up to the line, he will finish 8th.
Well, you know, if Beloki had attacked earlier, Armstrong would have countered earlier, and this man might have come over the brow at the finish in the process of being overtaken by a clockwork Texan. He didn't though, and there's confirmation of what a cheap comic might call the 1-2-3. Virenque taking the stage by 1:58 from the only other survivor of the breakaway, Alexander Botero, with Armstrong 2:20 back in third and Beloki another 1:45 behind him. 7.5 minutes behind the winner and slipping down the placings was the former yellow jersey Igor González de Galdeano, while Santiago Botero, who started the day 5th, had an even worse 1-2 experience, coming in over 15 minutes back. Behind them, David Miller came in 67th, 18 minutes down, while of the sprinters, Eric Zabel survived the day better than Robbie McEwen, although there were no points for either of them. Afterwards, David Miller spoke to Matt Rendell.
David Miller, that looked hellish.
Yeah, it was. It was a horrible day. A really hard day.
Was your performance affected by yesterday's victory and celebrations?
No, not celebrations, just yesterday being off the front for 170 Ks. Just a really hard climb, just tired.
At the finish, the French popular hero who tried and failed to escape from a mountain stage win 2 days running congratulated the one who finally managed it. Some of his past victories may have been tainted by a suspension for drug use, but today Richard Virenque seems to have shown that he can still win and win clean. And that ride by Richard Virenque has now moved him up to 10th in the overall standings. At the top though, Lance Armstrong's lead over Joseba Beloki is now up to 4:21, with Raimondus Rumsas leaping over Igor González de Galdeano into 3rd place. David Miller is now 56th. After a rest day to recover from the rigours of Mont Ventoux, the race resumed on stage 15 in the Alps. The problem for Lance Armstrong's challengers, though, was just the same as it had been in the Pyrenees: how to cope with the murderous pace he'd been setting in the mountains using that distinctive high cadence riding style. Of course, if you look up cadence in the dictionary, there's no mention of pedalling frequency, or in fact cycling at all. But the main definition tells you all you need to know anyway: the beat or measure of something rhythmic. And on the evidence of the last couple of years, it looks as though Lance has got non-stop techno coming through his earpiece, while the rest of the peloton is tuned to radio too.
It is going to be a question of setting the tempo, which is his. That cadence is unbelievable. He ticks over those pedals.
Armstrong climbs on a small gear and turns the pedals up to 100 times a minute. That's maybe 20 times per minute more than serious climbers like Beloki and Botero, and incidentally, more than Lance Armstrong Mark I. When he first raced the Tour, he rode like most non-flyweights do, on power. It wasn't until his post-cancer reinvention of himself as a cyclist that he adopted the baby steps approach in conjunction with his coach, Chris Carmichael.
What Lance will do is keep his pedal cadence higher than most of his opponents out there. He'll probably average about 90 to maybe 100 RPMs at times. That kind of helps reduce muscle stress, saves his legs, and keep himself essentially fresher for the climb.
Same speed, less effort is the magic formula sought by every cyclist. Not surprisingly, it's starting to catch on.
Sure, he does pedal at high frequency, but that's mainly when we see him on the TV in those attacking, winning moves. The rest of the time, he's not quite so high. It's only when he's really on the attack, and that's the difference, I think. To attack, you've got to be able to rev out on the mountains, which is very, very difficult to do. The rest of the time, you've got to be trying to sit in and just maintain that momentum, which is what he's doing generally behind his US train. He's very, very comfortable. Definitely what he's doing now is what I'd imagine a lot of the guys are trying to follow and try and copy.
And cycling at the moment, its fashion is high cadence because Lance is winning. If Lance wasn't winning and it was Ullrich winning with big gear, everyone would be training big gear. Whoever wins the Tour de France creates the fashion.
Coming from the track and a time trial background, I was very much a drop heel sort of driving cyclist. But in the mountains, we've seen Lance on his, he's on his toes, he's pedaling away, and it works. It's definitely the way to go. It just takes a lot of time, a lot of work to become efficient yourself, especially if you haven't been that way the rest of your career.
So this time next year, the entire peloton could be metronoming up mountains like wind-up toys. Although following fashion doesn't necessarily mean being able to catch it. Armstrong's ascent of Mont Ventoux on Sunday was timed at 58 minutes, fastest the famous mountain's ever been climbed in the Tour. Just the kind of news to put the rest of the peloton in the mood for a big alpine day. And there it is, the longest of the entire race at 226.5 kilometres. 6 minor climbs along the way, before the big one up to Les Deux Alpes. Christophe Moreau wouldn't be climbing it though. The Credit Agricole leader, who'd spent most of the Tour either on the floor or trying to put other riders there, crashed again, gashed his lip and abandoned what's been a miserable race for him, with the misery clearly evident as he went. The day's Reckless Driver Award, meanwhile, went to Benoit Joachim of US Postal, clearly failing to stay in lane on one of the climbs and cutting up Bonjour's Sylvain Chavanel.
As we look now at the breakaway, we can tell you there's been a crash in the peloton, and Pasquale Llorente, the only rider to fall. The breakaway at the last time check, leading by 8:55, but that time check is on Acevedo, who is chasing. It's another 30 seconds back to the main field with Lance Armstrong and everybody, which means that the lead break to bunch is now 7 kilometres, almost 5 miles. And that means the breakaway, we're looking at them here from the helicopter, will succeed today. Now, pick a winner from 7. They all look pretty frisky to me, and we've had no passengers so far.
Well, I'll pick 3 already, Phil. I'll put my neck out on Botero, Hertz and Axel Merckx. This is Botero. Lost himself 15 minutes on the slopes of the Mont Ventoux a couple of days. The highest man in the overall standings, 18th, 18 minutes and 36 seconds behind Lance Armstrong. And 15 of that was lost on one single climb.
Yes, when you hit the wall, you hit the wall. He was nursed up the climb by a teammate. But he has had a good tour until then, and he's trying to now redeem himself a little bit and try for a stage win. Advantage climbers, of course, right up to the finishing line today. They're on this false flat at the moment. Sorry a little bit about this picture breakup. We've lost it for a second. We'll wander around the Alps in the helicopter till we can sort it out for you, which won't be very long. But as they start the climb, once they turn right off this valley road, it continues at the same gradient all of the way to the line. Here we have the boys in blue now coursing through Bourg d'Oisans, the American flag flying higher than the French, and there's an awful lot of Americans on this stage today. I think they've all waited to see if Lance Armstrong was going to win the Tour again before booking their tickets. They think they know the answer now. They have come here in their thousands. There's plenty of them around. There's the latest, 9:05 it is to Acevedo of the Once team. At the moment, doing the team leaders no harm at all, because while he stays away from the peloton, he's giving them a higher overall position in the team. And then we go back to about 9:25 to the main field.
Well, people have been talking about Armstrong's ability to climb. Well, I don't think anybody in this Tour can rival him man on man when it comes to climbing, because just 2 days ago he set a brand new record for the ascension of the Mont Ventoux. The 21-kilometre climb he covered inside of an hour in 58 minutes. And that just goes to show how rapidly that man is going. But I have to say, I think, Phil, he is proving to be very attentive as well. The only thing that he's worried about is, in fact, getting himself onto the attack from a group of Once riders. And in fact, the fastest man up Mont Ventoux a couple of years ago was Marco Pantani. That was 58 minutes and 53 seconds. So Armstrong giving the former Italian climber a real battering.
So I think that's both records now, because I think Armstrong also has the one on the opposite side of the road here, up Alpe d'Huez now, which also was claimed by Marco Pantani before. Now Sandy Cazar on the back. I wonder who's going to launch the first attack. This is the climb, but it's not the steep part yet. This is the false bit, which nobody seems to talk about, but it's a real struggle before they make the right turn onto Les Deux Alpes.
It's very unfair, because the banner indicating 11.2 kilometres to go to the finish is 4 kilometres away from where these guys are right now. And driving up here yesterday, Phil, it was quite a savage little climb just to get to the corner.
It certainly was. This is Axel Merckx. They've brought back Acevedo, so they've hunted him down. And they're going to keep the pressure on now to try and stop people doing that again. Now watch out for the Lamprey boys. They're also getting up near the front a lot now, because they've got great confidence in Raimundus Rumsas, who has also said it may not mean a lot to the public watching the race, but I want second place, not third in Paris. So Acevedo's team, Once, are going to have to watch out for their man, Joseba Beloki. It'll be very, very interesting, this fight for second place. We've always said it would be a good race for second place, but you know, Rumsas always said in his first tour he'd come here to win it. And I must say that ended all of the questions the other day, because everybody was amazed at the confidence of this man in his first Tour de France. Here are the leaders again. Botero, his strange position, always looks like he's the build of a big sprinter rather than a mountain climber and time trialist, the way he crawls all over that bicycle. As the peloton now arrive at 20 kilometers to go, we are through here by some 7 kilometers since we went through with the leaders. And tempo riding up the valley road now for the whole field of the Tour de France. In fact, that's not quite true, because on the climb of the Col d'Ornon, they have lost a few riders. 9 minutes exactly, they're saying, at 20 kilometers to go. 9 minutes exactly. So in 5 kilometers, the peloton have only pulled back 25 seconds.
Well, that we were talking a little earlier, Phil, about majestic backdrops. This really is a majestic bike ride today, because we are cutting right the way through the Alps at the moment, and instead of turning off to the right-hand side and going up to Les Deux Alpes, if they carried straight on and went over the Col de Lautaret, they would not be too far away from heading into Italy.
No, that's absolutely right. But tomorrow they'll turn their backs on Italy and they'll race the opposite way. And what a route they have over the high mountains of the Alps, the highest of the Alps, in fact, as we head over to the finishing climb at La Plagna. A really tough day tomorrow. For that reason, it may be Beloki has something up his sleeve. Tomorrow we climb over the Col de la Madeleine and keep on going. And we also have the giant of them all, the famous Col de Galibier, an all-category climb. It's a tough day, and the Galibier coming very early, which could mean the opportunity is there for the strong men to just take off.
Well, it's still a fairly flat part of the course for these guys. They've had a tough day, US Postal. They've been on the front of this bike race, Phil, for at least 160 kilometers, 100 miles, because that early breakaway, which is now 7 riders, escaped after just 64 kilometers of racing. But it wasn't easy to get to the 64th kilometer, because they were really hammering along over the first 90 kilometers, covering that 90 kilometers in around about 2 hours of racing.
Yeah. Peloton down by a few today as they drop off, as the peloton just relies on US Postal here to set all of the pace. 15 kilometers still to ride. The mountain is still to bite, although you wouldn't think so looking at this false bit of flat here. Axel Merckx has ridden it brilliantly today. Botero on the left is the most likely man to win the stage if he can break away. And there are others might like to spoil the party here. Just give you all of the names there. Botero, Merckx, Cazar, Magnon, Garcia, Acosta, Ertz and Vastia. They are the riders setting the pace. 9 minutes 10, the latest check we have. And that coming at 20 kilometers rather to go to the finish.
Well, Botero and Merckx are the only guys within half an hour of Lance Armstrong's lead at the moment. Botero's the best placed man in the overall classification in 18th place, and Axel Merckx is back in 29th, but he's 25 minutes behind Armstrong. A few moments ago there was a slight attempt at an acceleration by the man in the green shorts, Santiago Botero from Medellin in Colombia, and I think he was just testing the waters to see if there were any weak members of this leading group of 7 men at the moment. I still think that we'll see an attack coming from him once we get to the steeper part of this climb. The climb itself is measured at 11.2 kilometers, and the average gradient is 6.4%, and it actually hardly varies at all. It's a very steady climb, very different to some of the climbs we've gone up in the past, Phil, which vary from 10-12% to 3 or 4%. This is constant.
Yes, and it favors different types of cyclists when the gradients are a little bit more constant, not so much variation in tempo. Just look at this rider here, Santiago Botero from Colombia. A lot of people's favorite, by the way. A lot of people like this man. We're looking at Mario Ertz at the moment, but we were looking at Santiago Botero there. He's just off to the right. He's a crouch style. He's a great time trialist. Became the first Colombian ever to win a Tour de France time trial in this year's event. And what a scalp, taking Lance Armstrong at the same time. Merckx looking good. I'd love to be sat alongside Father Eddie Merckx and just listen to how he's commentating on his own son in a breakaway.
Well, Axel looks very comfortable. So too does Mario Ertz in the red jersey there. He looks excellent. But this is the green jersey, Robbie McEwen. He's just going to try and conserve as much energy as possible. That man is a sprinter. He's a man of the flatlands. And today he'll just ride up this final 15 kilometers and make sure he doesn't get caught out. This is the man who's the leader of the King of the Mountains competition, Laurent Jalabert. Again, you see, Phil, he's actually riding a very sensible bike race right now because he's conserving as much energy as possible. He knows he has to try and get himself points tomorrow to try and win that race.
He carries the red jersey of red number of his most aggressive rider as well. But today, he's not looking for any points. He's thinking that tomorrow, if he wastes too much energy today, he could be slaughtered on the Galibier. So he's going to watch it and probably just cruise as best he can. All chance gone for him of winning the Tour de France on time. McEwen is dropping off with the same thought.
Well, in fact, as we start to kick up right now, the yellow jersey group is absolutely blowing to smithereens. There's a teammate of Lance Armstrong coming backwards there, and it looks like Victor Hugo Peña on the left-hand side. He's done an awful lot of work today, and this is the back end of the group. There's Ludo Dirksens, the Lamprey rider in the pink and blue jersey with the balding head. He is coming out of the back right now, but more interesting, I think, will be when we go forward to see who has been left with Lance Armstrong and the yellow jersey.
So the peloton has split. Armstrong's going forward, and the majority of the rest of the race are going backwards right now.
There's Robbie Hunter on the right-hand side. He's had a fairly quiet Tour de France so far, but at least he's still in the bike race. His leader, Óscar Freire, has been left by the wayside, and in fact, the Mappé team have lost 3 men so far. Not only Óscar Freire, but Fabien de Waele pulled out of the bike race, and very early on we saw the abandon of Tom Steels. Robbie Hunter, I think, will have to sit back and try and nurse his body through the mountains, and he will, as one of the top sprinters left in the bike race, be thinking about a win on the Champs-Élysées.
The only place left for him to think about a win, and maybe he'll do it. Let's hope that he can, because I know South Africa will be highly delighted with his performance. Robbie Hunter riding in his second Tour de France and didn't in fact finish in his first one.
Well, everybody's back together right now, despite that little acceleration a few moments ago by Santiago Botero. Here is the main group, led by Lance Armstrong, and rather interestingly, his teammates have disappeared very quickly once the climb bit in. But 2 men on the front there. I would expect one of those men to be Chechu Rubiera, and probably the other man with him as well would be Floyd Landis, because in fact Armstrong himself predicting that Landis would ride a lot better on the Alpine passes than he did during the Pyrenees, and holding in reserve, as they have done for the last few mountain stages. Roberto Heras was riding in about 4th or 5th. But look at that, it's Georgi Hincapie. This man's a beast.
It's amazing. George, the man on the flatland, still surviving at the front with Floyd Landis, keeping up with Lance Armstrong, who is being trailed by Rumsas right on his back wheel. Beloki on the nose of the peloton as well. Levi Leipheimer off to the right as we look down, and Levi knows his parents and his brother are awaiting his arrival at the finishing line today, and seemingly warming to his first Tour de France, very much so now. He moved up to 9th overall after his ascension of Mont Ventoux.
Well, a couple of minutes today would move him very close to a top 5 or 6 place. This is Eric Zabel going out to the back, the other sprinter locked together in that competition with Robbie McEwen. And now there's an acceleration at the front coming from the men in pink, the Once team right now. So obviously they've got something in the back of their minds. They want to see whether or not Armstrong has recovered from the efforts he put in over the slopes of the Mont Ventoux.
Interesting to see now the boys in pink, the champion Once team. They're the leaders of the team race, are now putting on the pressure. Only Landis is left to look after Lance Armstrong. This is the most interesting development. Again, Once in force are now going to test the might of the USA.
Well, Eric Zabel just slipping off the back of the group. He's a great competitor, Zabel, a very aggressive bike rider. And in fact, he will be trying to conserve as much energy as possible to get himself inside of the elimination time. It's tough being a non-climber on the big mountain stages, because when it goes uphill like this, the only thing you can do is try and survive and stay in the bike race.
Battle Royale now as we start to move up the climb here. Riders, Andrea Taffy there, are beginning to crack. Hold steadily at the back, but there's a sense of action at the front of the peloton. Not least because this is David Brylance going back here. Number 75 is Thomas Konechny. But watch them go off one by one. The green jersey McEwen has already gone. David Miller has already gone. And in fact, Once have put all of their team on the front, and there is only one man left with Armstrong, and that, the last time we took a look, was Floyd Landis with Ralph Aldag here, and the gap is down to just over 8 minutes. They won't catch the leaders, but there are two races again today, the race for the stage victory at the front and the race for time that will decide the Tour de France from the peloton.
Well, 10 kilometres to go to the finish line right now, and there's a fair acceleration coming from Mario Hertz. The response is coming from Santiago Botero and Axel Merckx in third place. They are on the foot slopes now of the climb up to Les Deux Alpes, and Hertz has decided he wants to try and blow this race apart. He's a very good bike rider, and he's finished high up in the overall standings of the Tour de France in the past, which proves that he's capable of riding these mountains exceptionally well. The most important thing to see is how the other guys in the break happen, and this is a nice little move off the front. This is Miguel Martinez, the Olympic gold medalist at the mountain bike.
Well, a good move by little Miguel, taking advantage of the in-battle between Once and Armstrong and Landis, with also Raimundo Rumsas in there as well. He's thought, well, I'm going to go for it myself. Now, he's left it very late. He'll get a lot of cheers here because he's French and he's such a dapper little man as he's in his first Tour de France as well. His father was a king of the mountains in this race. There is Vogandy, the champion of France too, and I think he's in trouble at the back of the race now. Yes, he is. But Martinez racing for only 8th place right now. Christophe Moreau, former leader of the King of the Mountains, also unable now to hold on. Lost one Once rider there too.
Fusio Nozal going out of the back there. Faso Bortolo losing a man there, dropping off the back as well. But the group of the yellow jersey and Lance Armstrong's teammates is down to about 30 riders right now. Ibernesto.com losing Santiago Blanco. That's a bit of a surprise because a couple of years ago we were looking at him to be a man who could ride high in the overall standings of the Grand Tours. Another man coming out to the back one at a time, Frank Renier, the most aggressive rider over the first part of this Tour de France, and in fact one or two teams are expressing an interest in signing this man up for the future.
Well, his team ends at the end of this year, Bonjour, so he needs to find himself a new deal, that's for sure. This is Martinez now, he's made his move, can he hang on to it? We start to toughen up the slopes here towards the top of the climb.
It's very impressive to see this man attacking. Let's not forget we're in the third week of racing. He was a two-time world mountain bike champion and also the winner of the gold medal. Look at that little grin. Great for his father. His father, Mariano Martinez, was the king of the mountains at the Tour de France and won himself a stage into Morzine, which is not far away from where we're going in a couple of days' time. So it gives you an idea of how good Martinez is going when he can jump away from the Once train on the front like this. But Once, Phil, I think in the back of their minds are thinking about an attack.
Well, look at this here as we swing back to the front of the race. This is Axel Merckx now. The attack is coming from him. He's had strong legs all day, and he's got another pair of strong legs hooking up at the back in Santiago Botero. Mario Hertz is very vigilant, another good climber. These three need to start working quickly if they're going to shed themselves away from the other four. Merckx keeps it going, but he won't do this for long now because his attack has been countered by the other two.
Well, he's looking over his shoulder now to see if he's got the time gap. This is a tough bike rider. When you lose 15 minutes and then fight back like this, it just goes to prove you are a huge champion. The man from Medellin has really put the breakaway under pressure. Merckx is in second place on the road. Hertz is in third.
8 kilometers to go. Santiago Botero has got, I think, the final laugh, because the attack came first of all from Axel Merckx. As they all regrouped, it went again from Mario Hertz, and then it went from Botero. We're looking briefly at Miguel Martinez there. I'm not so sure we are. I think it was one of the riders of the leaders it was dropping. It was in fact Darcosa, the rider from Benesto. But he's gone off the back as we rapidly now move towards the front. This looks like Mario Hertz here, who was right on, but he's been cracked on the climb. Now the climb does start to bite now. A flurry of attacks And that's all it took Santiago Botero, but he's still got Merckx, I think, ahead of Hertz.
Well, these we're looking right now at some very good time trialists as well, because Mario Hertz is not a bad time trialist. He's got about 50 meters to try and pull back Axel Merckx, but around the corner is Santiago Botero from Colombia opening up the road.
Well, Axel Merckx, he may have won a stage of the Tour of Italy, but he's never won a stage of the Tour de France. His father would go absolutely potty if he did that, and now he's riding in second position. He's got to catch up with this man here. He's just like a metronome when he breaks away. He's an unusual stylist on the bike, isn't he, Paul? Doesn't look like a climber, doesn't look like a time trialist.
Looks more like a boxer, this man. He's a tough bike rider. He's one of the rare riders who's able to ride superbly in the mountains and put in a good time trial performance as well, and he's not scared at all of having a go on the flat. He really is a beast of a man. He's tried every discipline in the sport. He's been a mountain biker, he's ridden on the track, he rode the World Championships for Colombia in the pursuit, and right now he's proving at the Tour de France that he is a very versatile rider too. He's had 2 stage wins in the Tour de France. One of those was over a big mountain breakaway on the road to Briançon, and the other one was ahead of Lance Armstrong in an individual time trial, and that is no mean achievement.
It certainly is not. And indeed, he's winning, or not winning yet, but he's trying to win not far away from Briançon. It's just down the valley, where he was successful back in the year 2000. Dario Frigo having a little go. First time we've seen the frisky legs of the man who's done so well in the Giro d'Italia.
Well, he's a man who was very upset with his performance on the Mont Ventoux. Another one of the big losers on the slopes of the Giant of Provence. He could not believe that he'd suffered so much on a mountain in a bike race. There's another man going off the back of the group here, Patrice Algon, a former wearer of the King of the Mountains and a former stage winner of this year's Tour. And he's just managing to stay in contact at the moment.
Back up to the front now as we see the crowd here lining the slopes all the way up to the summit of Les Deux Alpes. Only the second time the Tour will have come to this beautiful ski town, and it absolutely packed with spectators today and bathed in warm sunshine. Message from the captain here, Vincenti Belda, just shouting at him, and he'll keep shouting at him too, because he's got the chance of a stage win here from Botero. You get these chances if you take them when you've lost time. Armstrong isn't worried any longer about Botero, but when Botero beat him in the time trial, of course, at that stage of the Tour de France, he was on the hit list of Armstrong.
He certainly was, and he could have been a serious threat if he hadn't suffered as he did on the slopes of the Mont Ventoux. Axel Merckx looking over his shoulder to see the position of Mario Hertz on the slopes of this climb right now. Axel's position and pedaling action looks very good for the moment, but he's going to have to do something special to try and pull back the Colombian. The Colombian, by the way, has had 3 wins so far this year, and one of his biggest wins before the Tour de France must certainly have been the Classique des Alpes, which is a one-day bike race before the Dauphiné Libéré, and most of that is in this area where we're racing just now. This man does not look like a climber, but his pedaling action is absolutely superb. He uses a huge gear as well on the slopes of these climbs, and he's got an 18-second advantage over Axel Merckx. And in fact, in the early part of his career, Phil, he had to serve a suspension for a high testosterone level. But in fact, after being tested in various laboratories around the world, it was proved that this man from Colombia has a high natural testosterone level. And so he was given a license with special derogation by the International Cycling Union that even if he does boast in high controls, he cannot be regarded as being positive for that substance.
There's the latest gap, 22 seconds back to Axel Merckx. Here he is. This breakaway now spread all the way over the side of this climb up towards the finish at Les Deux Alpes. The pace continues. I haven't seen the 5 kilometres to go down yet, but it can't be very far ahead of this man, who's now been forced into making his move, possibly a little bit earlier than he thought, but once the other 2 attacked, he put in the counter-attack, which is giving the gap. Well, they're popping into that same tunnel, so we'll have to hang on, but quite clearly the Once riders are now making a real push here, and it's no longer US Postal on the front, it is Once trying to put Armstrong under pressure. Floyd Landis again showing us he is a great rider of the future.
Well, Lance Armstrong had said, watch out for Floyd Landis because he will ride a lot better in the Alps. Let's not forget it's this young man's first crack at the Tour de France, and he's riding superbly And the difficult thing is he has to ride under orders from Lance Armstrong. He can't have a day off, Phil, and sit in the slipstream of the rest of the main peloton, because he has to ride at the front on almost every kilometre of the stages, setting the pace for US Postal Service.
Yeah, it is a formidable request to make of any man, the way that US Postal are now obliged to ride this year's Tour de France in defence of Lance's yellow jersey. We're hearing that Dario Frigo continues clear of the peloton. He's now 6 minutes behind the leader. This is still the main field. Miguel Martinez has been taken back into the field. He was away, but Frigo went past him. Martinez gone into the group. Armstrong still nicely placed, and it's goodbye to Jörg Jatsk of the Once team. His pacemaking done.
Martinez right now, he's gone straight through. There is the leader of Cofidis. Now, this man certainly hasn't ridden like he did last year. Number 41 there, Andrei Kivilev. And in fact, let's not forget that before he went into the mountains last year, he gave himself around about a 20-minute advantage, because he was in that breakaway on the road to Pontarlier, which gained 34 minutes over the main field. And the reason he only got a 20-minute advantage was because a couple of days before that he'd lost 18.
Yeah. But just look at the tenaciousness there of Martinez. He doesn't want to allow the peloton to leave him. He's still fighting, while it looks as though Kivilev has resigned himself to the fact that he's not going to hang on today. Here he is, Santiago Botero, a man who's won 11 races in a career which began in 1996. 3 excellent wins this year, but of course the pride of his career was his stage 9 time trial win in this year's Tour de France. Merckx is losing ground, but he's hanging on to second place. 37 seconds is now the gap to Axel Merckx. He's just passed the Belgian flag there of the Flanders region. The long legs of Axel Merckx, just on 37 seconds, the time gap, as he gets higher and higher up towards the finish at Les Deux Alpes. He started the attacking, but it could be this man has finished it off, because Santiago Botero is now getting into his time trial mode on a mountain.
This guy is absolutely hammering up this mountain here. He goes under the banner of 5 kilometers to go. That's 3 miles, and it looks as if this climb here is almost flat. It's amazing how the television cameras seem to flatten out the intensity of these climbs. This climb is an average gradient of 7%. This man we're looking at right now, in fact, let's not forget, was the king of the mountains in last year's Tour. He's had a difficult Tour so far this time, because he lost himself 15 minutes on the slopes of the Mont Ventoux to plunge to 18th overall in the classification. But this ride today, if he can conserve most of these 8 minutes, Phil, he will move himself pretty well much up into the top 10 in the overall standings tonight. An idea there just to see how many people have turned out to see this bike race this afternoon. But I think there will be a lot more people tomorrow on the slopes of the Col de la Madeleine, the Col du Galibier, and the final climb of the day up to La Plagne. This man is opening up his advantage all of the time. It's 42 seconds right now. There's Richard Virenque. He would actually like to try and get himself into the top 5 on today's stage, because that would give him some serious points and close down the gap that he has on Richard Virenque in the King of the Mountains, Laurent Jalabert, I should say, in the King of the Mountains competition.
Well, back in the main field there is Virenque, still having no problem hanging on to the gap here at all. Daniel Atienza's number 42. Now a little pressure going on again at the front, and it could be Sastre turning the screw and testing them. There's plenty of legs that are quite frisky coming up towards the finish now. Again, a man that won't be jumped on straight away by Armstrong's team. A little bit of a gap. No reaction from Once, trying just to keep the pace to try and break Armstrong, and be careful they don't break their own man Beloki, I think, as the leader's now approaching the 4 kilometers to go. Carlos Sastre, number 2 on the CSC team, but we haven't seen that much of him in this year's Tour de France.
Virenque looking in difficulty there in the grey jersey of Domo, about 5 or 6 riders from the back. There's Bobby Julich on the right-hand side wearing number 17. It was on the slopes of this same mountain in 1998 that he moved up in the overall standings, and he was very close to, in fact, moving ahead of Jan Ullrich on that occasion. And what a day that was. It was freezing cold conditions, completely different to today, where we've seen temperatures of almost 100 degrees Fahrenheit on the valley roads. Axel Merckx is now slipping away from Santiago Botero. He's almost 1 minute behind right now, but he will not give up until he gets up to the final kilometre. He will do everything he can, hoping that Santiago Botero weakens, but looking at the Colombian style a few moments ago, that doesn't look like it was going to happen. There is the main field, still led by the Once squad. And I think they're more interested really in defending Beloki's second place actually than putting Armstrong into difficulty, because Armstrong is just sitting there and watching the operation.
Well, still they continue to be squashed by the pace again today. There is Vogandy. He's been riding high in the white jersey competition in third place, and he's still hanging on in there, but there's a scurrying of riders now. Richard Virenque himself, the hero of Mont Ventoux, after 200 kilometers in front, is now giving best to the climbers who are speeding away.
Well, he doesn't have the climbing legs that he had a few years ago, which gave him the King of the Mountains competition on 5 separate occasions, but he certainly has the love of the French after that performance on the slopes of the Mont Ventoux. I think those last 5 kilometers he rode on absolute courage, because there can't have been that much energy left in his body. Santiago Botero, though, look at this, Phil. This is an unbelievable battling style this man has got. He is really stamping on those pedals right now. Just out of interest, his nickname in Colombia is El Mono, and that's because of the very light blue eyes that he has, and very dissimilar to many of his countrymates in the area around Medellin. This man looks broken, Mario Hertz. He had attacked earlier on, but right now he can only hope to hold on to his third place on the road at the moment.
Well, it's been a marvellous race to the front, but that breakaway now is all in favour of the Colombian, looking for win number 2 of the stage in this year's Tour de France. We come back up alongside Axel Merckx, still hanging on to a second place finish, but he's not making any improvement on the time trialing ability of the Colombian climber. This man has got a superb tempo going right now. Just crouches all over his machine here, watched all over by the commissaires, the race referees, as he's inside 3.5 kilometers to go to the finish now for Santiago Botero. Former white jersey winner, former King of the Mountains. He won the King of the Mountains back in 2000. He's won 2 stages before, one in 2000 at Briançon, and of course here at Lorient in the time trial, which he can claim now to be the first Colombian to do that. Now Mario Hertz has come up behind Axel Merckx here at the back of the race. So they're riding for second and third, while the leader is at 3 kilometers from the summit, and I can't see anybody getting to him now. The Once Armstrong peloton at 7 minutes and 7 seconds. Still a number of riders between them and Botero.
Well, he really was battling. This is Nicolas Vogandy, the French national champion, going out of the back of the group. He will just hope to survive right now, because the pressure on the front end of this group is being set by the Once train today, really hammering up this climb. The next man to go off the back will be Laurent Brochard here, wearing number 204. Not very much at home on the big mountain passes these days. Much more adept at trying to get away from the main field and survive in the long breakaways, but he missed it today. This is now the team management coming up alongside Kelme. The Kelme rider Botero. This is an unbelievable style that he's got here, Phil. He's just killing that bike. He's trying to find as much energy as he can. It's a very explosive and powerful style. Not very similar to the style of a climber that we would be used to on these mountain slopes, sitting using a small gear, getting out of the saddle all of the time. But right now, he is hammering a monster gear and hoping to stay in front. In fact, Merckx has been caught and passed by Mario Hertz.
The grand battle of the breakaway now, 3 kilometers from the summit for the rider in second place. Mario Hertz has gone right by Mario Hertz right by Axel Merckx. But the man who's leading, here's the pass for you. The man who's leading, Santiago Botero, heading for his second stage win for Kelme. They're not going to approach him now. They are spread right down the mountain from this breakaway. 6 minutes 35 is the latest check back to the peloton. They're closing, but not quick enough, I don't think. The breakaway will succeed today. Merckx really has been the King of the Mountains on this day, winning most of them, and probably having done enough to claim 5th or 6th place overall in the King of the Mountains, not the race, by the way.
Well, he won't be too happy about getting caught here right now, because he's going to be in third place on the road right now. He's been caught and passed by his compatriot there, Mario Hertz. Hertz was one of the first riders to attack, but the first serious, vicious attack that came from Santiago Botero. And Botero at the moment around about a minute in front of the second place rider on the road. Colombian flag there. It's amazing, Phil, the number of international spectators who come to see the Tour de France these days. There's an English flag there, British flag I should say, there's American flags, Colombian flags, Spanish. It's quite remarkable that these people come from all over the world to witness this bike race.
German there. They're all here today, and I think the majority of the finishing line are American. And they're not just there to cheer Lance Armstrong. Levi Leipheimer has a bit of a following up there today, and the reason being he's moved up to 9th overall. Here's Vincenti Garcia Acosta. No, this has come from the front of the race, this is another move. It could be Mancebo.
Quick response coming from Once. They're nailing everything back right now, trying to keep control of the front end of the main field. Armstrong quite happy today. The only teammate I think he's got left in this group with him, in fact, is Roberto Heras, who's been kept in reserve. The man on the front right now there is Michael Bogert. He'll be doing the work for Levi Leipheimer. Leipheimer is in that group. I've seen him once or twice fairly close to the front, so he's conserving his 9th place in the overall classification. Richard Virenque, by the way, who started the day in 10th, has been dropped by that group, so he will probably lose a couple of places by the end of today. But this is the man who is really battling with his bike, battling with his body, just to keep that gear ticking over right now. This man is a huge talent from Colombia.
Well, in that battle behind, Levi Leipheimer is only a handful of seconds, 9 indeed, behind Óscar Sevilla, who is in that group as far as we know. And his next target would be that of Roberto Heras, who isn't that far ahead of him either. So if he can slip anybody on the climb today, he could be climbing up to a top 6 finish in the Tour de France. In your first tour, that's an excellent performance, because he's had the pressure too of being the leader of a team, in his case for the first time. Here we are now. I still have one Rabobank rider there trying to do best here for Levi Leipheimer. Looks like it is the figure there of Michael Bogert, but look how dramatically that bunch has split. There is Leipheimer doing well, because I don't see Óscar Sevilla there.
Well, that would be good if the man who leads the Once has been, the Kelme team has been dropped behind, because that means in that case Levi Leipheimer will move up to 8th place in the standings this evening.
And of course his ability in the time trial, that much better than Roberto Heras, and a real good chance of a top 6 for him. Let's hope so. His mum and dad and his brother are here to see him home today. Meanwhile, back in the struggling department now, it looks like Ivan Gotti, twice a winner of the Giro d'Italia, and also there is Óscar Sevilla hanging on to the tail of this group. And not quite the rider he was last year, Paul, is it?
Hasn't had a great Tour de France so far. In fact, he's in a group of riders, I think, just making contact with the Armstrong group. There, I thought, was a quick glimpse of Roberto Heras. There's number 1, Armstrong. On the far side there, Massimiliano Lelli, but this is the man who will get the victory this afternoon. And again, what a tough way to win a mountain stage, going out on the attack 100 miles from the finish. A quick glimpse there, Leipheimer moving up to the front of his group there with Michael Bogert. And the race completely opened up here by Santiago Botero. He will get the win this afternoon, and that will make him only the 2nd person in this bike race to have multiple wins to his credit, because Armstrong is the only other person to have won more than 1 stage so far. Armstrong has a total of 3, and with this win today, this man will get himself his 2nd.
And well deserved too by Botero. His 4th win of the season. When he gets it, there's nobody going to catch him now.
Well, Sevilla's in difficulty in the yellow jersey group, so that is good news for Levi Leipheimer. That's probably why his teammate Michael Bogert went to the front to lift up the pace. He's being waited for here by his teammate. This is Jose Enrique Gutierrez. But the battle for Kelme is at the front of the bike race today, because they will be getting their 2nd stage victory of this year's Tour de France, and both by the same man. His first win was a very prestigious one ahead of Lance Armstrong in the individual time trial around Lorient, and now he's going to get himself a mountain top finish to add to his mountain stage win a couple of years ago in Briançon.
Lance Armstrong about to end his 5th day as race leader of the Tour de France. His rivals clearly have not had the strength to lift the tempo and try to leave him. They've used their team to set the pace, but they haven't cracked Lance Armstrong. This rider wanted the stage win, 18 minutes slower than Armstrong to this point of the Tour de France. No longer a marked man. He's pulling back possibly 4 or 5 minutes of those lost 18. And he might well do well in the time trial still to come, and of course the 2 remaining mountain stages. But today he went out to make amends for the disaster of Mont Ventoux, and he's certainly done that. As Santiago Botero comes up towards the line as a Colombian for his 2nd stage win of the year in the Tour de France, that is. He won the time trial at Lorient. Now he's going to win the road race stage here to Les Deux Alpes. The only other man to win here, Marco Pantani. But it wasn't in a glorious hot summer's day like it is today. It must be an awful long way to the line, because it is all uphill until they cross the finishing line. Massive crowd here in this beautiful ski station. He's delighted, absolutely delighted now. This was a long way to go for the win, but he read it right, as the breakaway did the other day on Mont Ventoux. This time he's done it. Thank you, he says, and there's a lot of Colombian flags waving. Like all good professionals, make sure there's nobody creeping up, and there isn't.
Well, that was a great win, absolutely superb, and a long way out. This man is really a gutsy bike rider. Losing 15 minutes can blow your morale completely, and that's what he lost on the slopes of the Mont Ventoux. But today he came back and looked for the breakaway. He knows there'll be breakaways every day right now, because Armstrong's not going to chase men who are 20 minutes behind him in the overall classification, and he got himself the win.
Botero delighted, his bike probably just relieved. And behind him, the chief survivors of the original break, led home by Mario Aerts, who won the Belgian subcategory ahead of Axel Merckx. Behind them, though, the yellow jersey group, with nothing major at stake, was refusing to come quietly.
Here we are, this is David Echeverria we're looking at, but here comes Heras. Now, they've actually taken 5 kilometres out of that breakaway on the final ascension here to the finish. And Roberto Heras has gone clear now, and look at the face there of David Echeverria.
Well, Roberto Heras, I think, is trying to move himself up in the overall classification. He started the day in 7th. He's around about 40 seconds behind the man in front of him, Jose Acevedo. Francisco Mancebo is trying to close down the gap right now, and Levi Leipheimer is on the front end of the Lance Armstrong group. Well, Armstrong is not going to respond to this at all, because he wants his man to possibly finish in a podium position. Roberto Heras, over the last few mountains, have been kept back in reserve, and the reason for that is because Armstrong wants to put pressure on Beloki, Rumsas and the rest, and he would very much like to climb onto the podium in Paris with his teammate getting up into 2nd or 3rd position. This is Andy Cassar and Emmanuel Magnan. They're the survivors of the 7-man breakaway earlier on. And for Magnan, this, I would have to say without doubt of contradiction, is his best ever performance in a mountain stage.
Well, the remnants of the breakaway is coming to the line now, as Vicente Garcia Acosta just hangs on to that 7th place finish, because right behind him somewhere is Roberto Heras, again joined by Mancebo. And they could be time trialing back up to Heras here, which will do Levi Leipheimer a favour, because Heras was opening the gap a little bit. There's Leipheimer at the bottom of our picture, and here comes an attack from Beloki. Now there's the reaction from Armstrong. It was a little bit slow. He said, that's number 21, that's the man second to me, so he's gone after him. And Armstrong now, look at that, that's a cheeky move, Paul.
Well, it's a very good move by Beloki. In fact, he's opened up the gap.
It's straight past Heras.
Acceleration. Heras is there. He'll look over his shoulder and see Armstrong, but Armstrong won't panic. We are now looking at just seconds is what Beloki can gain if Armstrong doesn't come to his wheel. But I think the Texan has got this one under complete control. Slowly but surely, he's pulling himself back up to the slipstream, and Rumsas, look how attentive he is, Phil. He's come across there as well. These are the top 3 riders in the overall standings of the Tour de France this year. It was a brave move, but it's done nothing at all to change the standings.
A huge move on a huge gear by Joseba Beloki, and Armstrong a little bit slow to react and a bit shocked maybe, but he's got out of that hole very, very easily indeed. Concentrating, look at his face as he comes up here and just gets onto the back wheel of Beloki. And goes Rumsas now, because Rumsas is looking for 2nd place, and there's a little reminder too that he might well be looking for 2nd place overall in these next 2 days in the mountains.
Rumsas keeping the viewing figures high in Lithuania, and he led home the yellow jersey group ahead of Beloki and the jersey himself. All of them, of course, on the same time. You know, the only men who've won mountain stages and long time trials the past 5 years have also won the Tour. Botero has shown he can do both, although of course those lost 15 minutes on Mont Ventoux brought him well out of contention for the overall. And while the Kelme team mechanics set about straightening Botero's bike frame, the rest of the race was arriving on the instalment programme. Eric Zabel came home in a group just under 20 minutes behind the winner, with David Miller just over. Another couple of minutes back was Robbie McEwen. So no substantial change on the leaderboard, except that Santiago Botero moves up to 7th after clawing back almost half the 15 minutes he lost on stage 14. At the top, Armstrong is treating Beloki more like an annoyance than anything else, watching him all day and running after him like an irritated parent only when necessary. Day 2 in the Alps was far and away the most difficult mountain stage of the Tour. Not the degree of difficulty seemed to be making much difference to US Postal. Lance Armstrong's team were turning the race into an American remake of the Three Musketeers. All for one, and all for one. There's the stage, 3 of the highest category climbs in cycling, the Galibier, the Madeleine, and the final climb up to La Plagne. Well, the day was too much for 2 big names. Óscar Sevilla, lying 11th at the start, abandoned with stomach cramps, and Laurent Dufaux, who was 45th, climbed off 2. Just 29 kilometres into the stage, Rabobank's Michael Bogert attacked in a small group, which eventually shrank to just himself.
The crowds here must have waited a long time, Paul, on the top of the Col de la Madeleine. They actually closed the Col de Galibier before the evening yesterday. Only official tour cars could cross the mountain because of the people. And I would think that they closed this one pretty early too.
Well, they should be separated by around about 2 minutes, I would think, because they're just going inside the 1 kilometre banner as Michael Bogert comes up to the summit of this climb. He'll get some respite right now, Phil, because from the top of this climb at 2,000 metres, I should say, he will plunge downhill for 18 miles, 30 kilometres of descending, and once again a fairly tricky descent as well off the slopes of this mountain.
His average speed for the descent will be around about 45-50 miles an hour over that distance, but he'll hit the high spots of 60 to 65 as he goes down. There's the beautiful mountains of the Pyrenees. We're now plunging back to the valley on the outskirts of Albeville, and next stop La Plagne. This is the crowd as they welcome now the next 4 riders behind Michael Bogert. Now the man in the polka dot jersey, Laurent Jalabert. A second place for him today. It'll be mission accomplished because Botero is scoring nothing on this climb. He is in second place overall. This is the day we thought Laurent would try to stitch up the King of the Mountains. He still can be beaten if he carries on for a couple of more days, but he's making it that much more safer. And the last man in the Tour de France has just abandoned as well, Jimmy Casper.
Well, Jimmy Casper was having a very hard time on the first climb of the day, the Col de Galibier, even though the riders mostly rode up at a fairly steady tempo. But you know, when the lights go out, it's always very difficult to stay in a bike race on these very tough stages. But in fact, Laurent Jalabert this morning, Phil, was predicted that he would do what he could to get points on the first climb of the day, the big one over the Col de la Galibier. He thought he might have a chance of getting some points over the Col de la Madeleine, but then he admitted, I've got no chance of being there at the end of the day in La Plagne because that's just too hard.
Well, Jimmy Casper's a sprinter, but he hasn't really been sprinting very well either. They had big hopes for him on the Française du Jour team this year. It didn't happen. And he was the last man in Paris last year, 144th. And as you know, we've got a lot more riders than that still going in the Tour de France this year. He was hanging on to that last place overall at the start of the day, but he's gone now. These riders still climbing up towards the summit of the Col de la Madeleine. It'll be chilly up here. Also quite a strong wind blowing across the face of the mountain.
It's quite fun to follow Miguel Martinez going downhill because he is one of the best bike handlers in this group, and it'll be interesting to see if he does in fact adopt some of his mountain bike techniques going off the slopes of this very long descent. 30 kilometers from the summit. When the riders reach the summit, they still face 67 kilometers to go to the finishing line, and that correlates to about 42-43 miles, and 12 miles of those are up the last climb of the day to the finish here at La Plagne. Jalabert should get himself maximum points over the top here. That will give him 35 points, and that will extend his advantage over Santiago Botero to around about 80 points. and that should be pretty close to being comfortable.
Yes, but it is only 2 all category climbs, but running out of all category climbs now. There's one at the finish line though that carries 40 points. It's unlikely this group will still be clear by then, but you never know. Clock has started and it's counting, don't forget, on the arrival of Michael Bogert and Jalabert, and I don't think anybody's going to challenge him here because the others aren't in the competition and are playing, I think, just the friendly game of allowing the King of the Mountains elect, last year's King of the Mountains as well, to take the points. And Miguel Martinez, something of a friend and an admirer of Laurent Jalabert, certainly would not be challenging him for that second place. Now it's newspapers up the jersey, keep the wind out and get ready for the long flight down. No parachutes will be issued. You can see there, Paul, again the example of the campers now, which it's an explosion in the industry here now for the Tour de France. There are tens of thousands of these campers all over the mountains every year.
Well, it's a huge holiday venue, the Tour de France, these days for people from all over the world. Quite remarkable, people driving from Holland, Belgium, Italy to come and concentrate here on the road to the Tour de France and watch this bike race. And it really is unbelievable, the atmosphere driving up these mountains at night with people sitting at the side of the road, getting the barbecue going, spending a freezing cold night at the top of these mountains and enjoying the spectacle of the Tour de France coming by your front door, basically.
Yes, but it's all worth it. They have a wonderful time. And you make friends with the next door neighbour, and if you're lucky they might invite you to dinner as well. As the peloton now continues, and I can't get over the size of this peloton, still hanging on there. It's been a rather gentle climb, I think, amongst the leaders, which means they are building up the atmosphere for one terrific final climb today. It could be, Paul, that they are all feeling the pace of this year's Tour de France, because you saw the British flag there, so at this point they do have a tailwind on the climb.
Well, it's still Santiago Blanco on the front setting the tempo, and it really is surprising that Armstrong has decided to take a back seat. He's got nothing to worry about at all here. Now there's a recovery here coming on the descent here, and this looks very much like the shape of Stuart O'Grady whizzing round these corners, and I can't believe this because O'Grady right now is catching the Laurent Jalabert group. He must have climbed like a Trojan.
Well, we never saw him move away from the pack, and here he comes. He does descend like a stone. He's a terrific descender, and he's now hooked up. So again, he was at the front, remember, going to the start of this mountain, dropped by Michael Bogert on the climb, caught by the peloton, and now he's back up in the chase group that could yet pick up Michael Bogert on the descent. Quite amazing descent. So we're looking now at Bogert still on the false flat as he continues to pedal down the climb here, and these are the chasers. And as we look at the chasers here now, at the head of the field, as we race down to the valley where there is another hotspot sprint for the green points jersey, Stuart O'Grady has come back into the chase group. An absolutely amazing piece of cycling, Paul, and he's looking for another 6 points in the valley.
He's a tough bike rider, I tell you. He's a guy who would have suffered like a dog going over that mountain, and he took a huge risk on the descent to come back into the group, and he'll be looking at picking himself up another 4 points today. He certainly hasn't laid down arms in his hope to get the green jersey either.
This is the chase group. They're still going up the Col de la Madeleine. Stuart O'Grady has just flown from them, gone over the top, scored points on the mountains, and has contacted the chase group of Jalabert. And we're looking now at the riders who are dropping slowly off the back. It looks like Chavanel has gone again. This is Bietzeberg here, as riders start to slip slowly off the bunch as the pressure goes on. The referee there looking out the window, I've just heard him shout at 1 or 2 people on motorbikes because it comes over our earphones as well. He was not happy with something, and he's now going to get back in the car. Now let me just tell you what's happened so far. Over the top has gone Michael Bogert. At just over 3 minutes, Laurent Jalabert, Miguel Martinez, Iban Mayo, Turpin, and then Stuart O'Grady, who's now caught them. And now we're waiting for the rest to go over the top, the yellow jersey group. Roberto Heras up there too.
Check this out, though.
I know what you're going to say.
George Hincapie is coming forward. That is unbelievable. I mean, everybody is saying George Hincapie is riding an incredible Tour de France. It is a large group, I do have to say, but Hincapie is pulling himself inside out for Lance Armstrong. There he is. He's got his gold sunglasses on the front, and he's going to lead the peloton over the summit of the toughest climb of the day, the Col de la Madeleine. I've got to take my hat off to Georgie, because George is a big man and he's got a big body to drag over these climbs.
Absolutely, and he's done it well. And he's right there at the moment. And Lance might still need him today. Now we're back with the leader. Road's a bit narrow on the way down the Col de la Madeleine. He might get a bit dizzy if our camera follows him down and go with him. But let's hope he's not a good descender. And the riders behind are much faster. He might well be joined here on the descent, but they've still got to close down around about 3 minutes. And goodness knows how on earth Stuart O'Grady got across to this gap. He is simply riding superbly today. And as he's a bit of a friend, we can call him up later on and ask him what on earth he was doing today, what was in his mind.
He's a great bike rider, and it's great to see him maybe trying to raise the morale of the camp, Crédit Agricole, because after the abandon of Christophe Moreau, they must have been pretty down last night, I would think, at the dinner table. And Moreau pulling out, saying he really didn't want to abandon the Tour de France, but having just one more crash to add to his many since the start in Luxembourg, I don't think he could take it anymore. But Stewie's flying the flag for Crédit Agricole this afternoon. And if he rides like this when he goes across to Manchester in just over a week's time, Phil, he's going to be a difficult man to beat in the Commonwealth Games road race.
I think he might well be. Little Miguel just altering the Velcro on his shoes there, probably just slackening them off a little bit, because on a climb your feet start to get quite painful, and he's just releasing them. Air swelled up a little bit as well. So these riders are all, as far, I don't know about Mayo, but the rest are all very, very quick descenders. And so they might well contact Michael Bogert or get close enough to pick him up in the Valley Road. They're racing down the mountain now. The actual sprint for the points for Stuart is at Bellacom, which is only 37 kilometres from the finish of the race. And I should think now that they're likely to be still clear by there, because they still have the gap as help comes up here for Ludovic Turpin. And he is doing the ride of his life today. He's gone over the Madeleine with a senior group. Long road ahead, very quick descent, and bends are not too nasty just at the moment. We look down there now at the chase group, the peloton. Their gap at the top was 7 minutes and 50 seconds. Meanwhile, here comes Ricky Virenque.
Well, he was only 20 seconds off the yellow jersey group over the summit of the Col de la Madeleine, and there is the yellow jersey group there, stretched out in one big long line. So in the next 200 or 300 meters and a couple more corners, he'll be on the tail of that group, and I would think a very happy man to be able to ride along the Valley Road in the relative comfort of the main field, I should say, because it would still be a pretty difficult ride along the Valley Road. Right now we're looking at an 18-mile descent, and some people think that it's good fun going downhill, but it can actually, on these mountain passes in the Tour de France, you can get to the bottom of one of these descents and your arms are actually aching because you've been going downhill for so long.
I can imagine that. And Richard Virenque is now back on, so it paid just to limit as best he could his losses on the peloton on the way up. That must really have hurt that last 5 kilometers, but it's paid off now. He's back in the bunch. Meanwhile, up front, the hero of the day, Michael Bogert, and the Netherlands will be loving him for this, because they get many hours alive of the Tour de France every day. And this particular team this year, Rabobank, is a team full of some real spirited bike riders. And so Karsten Groen has got them a stage win very early on at Plouay when we were up there in Brittany. And now it's up to Levi Leipheimer to give them a high finish in Paris. I don't think Levi is going to get on the podium in the top 3, but certainly he's making good progress steadily up the overall classification. He is 9th currently, but there's not a lot of time between 9th and 6th in the Tour de France, and he's a better time trialist than most of those who lie ahead of him.
Jalabert is the man making most of the tempo on this descent here right now, and just going over the summit of that climb. They were 3 minutes and 20 seconds behind Michael Bogert, and just 15 seconds behind them was Stuart O'Grady. So O'Grady did an unbelievable climb on his own. At 4:45 from the leader was Marcos Serrano. Axel Merckx is still in there with a chance. He's at 4:55, and then Guterres is still surviving at 5 minutes 40. But Fanini, who was with Stuart O'Grady, in fact went over the summit 7 minutes behind. And I would think that Robbie Hunter, the South African, well, he was picked up by the main field, who crossed at 7:45.
So the main field 7 minutes 45 seconds behind, not really chasing the breakaways that are of no interest to Lance Armstrong. He's just keeping his team doing what they have to do. Riding in third place here, and still looking cool, and still has seen no effort from his nearest rivals to beat him in this year's Tour de France. He must be asking himself, just how strong are they right now, because I'm not so sure they're strong enough to even attack him. But we'll certainly see everybody try to their utmost limit on the climb of La Plagne, because the finishing line awaits them.
It's a tough climb as well. I'd actually forgotten, having ridden up here in 1984 in the Tour when Laurent Fignon got himself the stage victory there. I kind of remembered it was 12 or 13 kilometers in length, and it took us forever coming up this mountain last night in the car. 18 kilometers at almost 7% of the average gradient. It really is going to cause some serious time gaps, because the difficult thing about this climb, Phil, is you have to try so hard just to keep the bike going. As we rejoin Michael Bogert here, you get a chance to see just how nasty this descent is. And if you make a false move on this descent here, you've got to drop down an awful long way before you stop.
Well, we don't want to see that happening. Got 54 kilometers to go. Michael is going to have to slam the brakes on for that full 180, as the same for the chasers here. But they go in, their right knee out for balance as they come off the bend, and you see the acceleration coming from the front. That is Stuart O'Grady. He is the ace descender, that man, and that's how he came back. He was never caught by the peloton. He stayed away. He climbed by himself on the mountain of the Medellin when he dropped to Fanini, and then he came back to the leaders on the descent. Here's the train looking strong once again now, as they've got their men reorganized at the front, and seeing the way down the mountain is a big bonus, keeping out of trouble as well. George Hincapie on the left drives on. It is Pavel Paternos, it is on the right, the big man on the team. These two workhorses, Roberto Heras is saying, you know, everybody's talking about me with Lance, but think of these other two, Hincapie and Paternos, because they are the men of the team, and I think he might be right too. Many people think, well, why do so many people come to see the Tour de France when it takes about half a minute for them to go through on a flat stage and about half an hour on a mountain stage? But of course they come because they sample the atmosphere of this great sporting event, and they can follow the rest of it on television or radio when it's passed by. 50 meters to the sprint now, and he'll just pocket the few €100 for the first prize, plus the bonus of 6 seconds means nothing to him, as do not the 6 points for the victory either. Watch out for the second place sprint.
Well, the second sprint, I will think of go to Stuart O'Grady, because he's the fastest man in the group. He's got the most reason to try and win it.
This is the chasing group now, led by Laurent Jalabert. Stuart O'Grady won second place. That's where he is just now in the group. Axel Merckx not interested. He's just still out of breath from rejoining the chase group after a very, very good descent for a tall man. And there's the composition of the group for you now, same as it has been for many, many miles. We're not too far from the sprint, in fact, as we're turning now to the right as we run down towards Bellecombe. Clock is running at the sprint point. Bogert's gone through, picked up the small prize there. It'll be an interesting sprint though for second place, I think. Meanwhile, back in the house of the yellow jersey, the Spanish riders are all around Lance Armstrong, but they have not yet found the strength to attack him rather.
Armstrong just really, since this race started in Luxembourg, has been sitting in the first 15 or 20 places, just waiting for the strategic points of the event where he had already planned he was going to lay down his foundations for victory. And so far at every rendezvous he's come up with the goods. But he's a sensible bike rider, which is why we've not seen him attacking wastefully. He's always gone on the attack when he knows he can put time between himself and his rivals. But he also knows that the last week of the Tour de France can be a strange week too. And he's suffered a fairly tough week of 1999 when he went up the Col de Jouplan with Richard Virenque and Jan Ullrich. They had almost resigned to the fact that he was going to win the bike race, and they saw him falter. And at the end of the day, they'll lose himself for almost 2 minutes on the last climb of the Tour.
He's little Roberto here. He's handing in his racing cape, which he wore on the way down the mountain. He won't need it again because it's all uphill to the finish. There's the highway I was telling you about. We're coming in from the valley now, from the Col de la Madeleine. Very dangerous road, the highway, because it's been constructed with a great deal of skill, but there's still a lot of roadworks on it, even though it's been like that for many years. Back to the leader again now, as we head through towards Moutier, which was the headquarters not very far away from the athletes' camp, the village in the Olympic Games in '92 at Brive-les-Bains. And this has certainly been a show of defiance by Michael Bogert. He's been riding at equal to all of the pace behind. They've not come in any closer to him. This is the main road that goes into Italy here, and there's no alternative route, so don't ask me where all the cars have gone, Paul.
I think they've had to be deviated around for the different valleys to get across into Italy today. But Michael Bogert, by the way, has been basically in the same team structure since he turned professional back in 1994. Stuart O'Grady here, just accelerating away, and nobody wants to take up the challenge right now. This is why O'Grady stuck to his guns over the Col de la Madeleine. He worked exceptionally hard to go back on the descent and get himself 4 points. A hard day for him to earn 10 points, but he's bringing himself just a little bit closer to the top of that points classification.
10 points in the bag today for Stuart on a mountain stage. You must take your hat off to him for that. The other riders aren't going to attack him. There's no reason to, because they're not part of that competition. So hats off to Stuart O'Grady, the man from South Australia. Brian and Faye, his mum and dad, will be shouting at the television, no doubt, because they don't give him an easy time, Stuart O'Grady. They want to keep him on his toes.
20 kilometres to go for the main field, but this man is now around about 18 kilometres from the finishing line, because he's well inside, Phil, the town of Aime. He's got a little tricky little ascent to make here before dropping away down to the right-hand side over the river, and then the road kicks up, and my goodness me, what a climb it is.
Sun right in his back now as we snake across this nice little town. The crowd cheering him on, and his lead is 4 minutes 50, so he's pulled away from the riders behind here as he continues to make the speed towards the start. He is riding with such determination today. He has won a stage of the Tour de France before, but this would be one of the finest victories of his life, to win a mountain stage of the ferocity of this stage today.
He'd always hoped to win Alpe d'Huez, because that really has become a haven for the Dutch cyclists over the last few years. And because Alpe d'Huez has not been included in the Tour de France this year, I would think he will be certainly looking to try and get himself a mountain top win here, and the Dutch will go absolutely berserk at the top of this mountain. A huge number of Dutch tourists come down to the Tour de France on every separate year that we come down here, and most of them congregate here in the Alps to see their riders hopefully get themselves a stage victory, and this will give them a lot of hope today to see this performance by Michael Bogert. In fact, his advantage over the chasers right now is tipping up towards 5 minutes. But I tell you what, when he changes his pedaling action from the hard, heavy gears that he's been rolling along this flat valley road to the lower gears at the far end of the spectrum, he will certainly start to suffer.
Well, as we watch here, Michael Bogert planning now his final assault of the day. The man who has ridden so well, he put his attack in right at the start of the climb of the Col de la Madeleine, which was 67 kilometers from the finish, and he's been in the lead ever since and looking so good. These riders have tried to pin him back without success, and you've got there Stuart O'Grady has done so well today to put himself in this situation as well. He's the Australian in the breakaway. In many ways, the English-speaking Tour de France this year. 2 Australian stage wins, and of course Lance's stage wins and David Miller's stage win. Axel Merckx. These riders all working together, just doing enough at the front, and then they're pacing each other. They've still got to come into the town of Aime, so It looks as though that time of nearly 5 minutes is pretty accurate on this group. And he did well to ride away from them. He's just time trialled superbly today, Bogert. He is a good time trialist, but he's not one of the world-renowned time trialists, but he's certainly done it well today.
Well, this situation now is not looking good for Axel Merckx. If they've been able to keep it at 2.5 to 3 minutes to Michael Bogert, I would have not been surprised to see an attack coming from Axel to try and get him the stage victory. He certainly would have appreciated that. But in fact, talking to one of the Belgian journalists before the start, and Axel was complaining severely for the last couple of days about having a very typical cyclist injury. The area entre-jambes, as the French like to call it politely. He's got some pretty bad saddle sores.
Well, isn't that beautiful? That's the road that they're coursing along around the edge of the mountain right now. This man is off that road and into the mountain today. There's only one way out of this tour now. That's back down the road he's climbing up. But he'll be doing that by car later at 17 kilometers to go. Just 10 miles to the finish. And he's been given 3-mile start over the leaders of the Tour de France. But those legs have got to be tired now. And he's got some great climbers chasing him. We're waiting for the latest check, but it appears to be 4 minutes and 58 seconds. And Jalabert, and I think Iban Mayo will launch a searing attack at some stage on this climb.
He will try and distance himself between the men who've been his allies over the flat valley roads. 6 of them in all, but they're now trailing the lone leader by almost 5 minutes. So the man at the front of the bike race, Michael Bogert, has been doing an absolutely superb job. But right now his only question is, can he survive? Because up to the right-hand side there is where he has to climb, and it's going to take him 18 kilometers. And that 18 kilometers of climbing is going to take him around about 45 minutes of absolute and sheer agony. And I wonder what's going through Stewie O'Grady's mind right now, because he's not one of the great climbers of the Tour de France at all in any way, but he's done a brilliant job today. He's got himself 10 points for the green jersey points competition on a day when he probably thought that would have been impossible.
Well, they're saying now, Paul, 5 minutes exactly now, so he's still pulling away from that group that's chasing him, even though he's now on the climb. So this is an inspired ride today, one of the best rides I've seen Michael do. He's obviously decided to leave his mark on this year's Tour de France, overshadowed perhaps by the arrival of Levi Leipheimer on the team, who's been brought in to try and win the Tour because of his 3rd place finish last year in the Tour of Spain. And he's getting not a lot of great press in Holland because he's only, and I put that in quotes, only lying 9th in the Tour de France. I think that's an excellent position in your first Tour. Miguel Indurain, who won 5, didn't finish his first 2 Tours de France.
Absolutely true, and they went to win on 5 in the run. You can see the organisation of the teams now as we get closer to the town of Aim, where this climb is going to start. The blue jerseys of US Postal all surrounding Lance Armstrong, the pink jerseys of Once all around Igor González de Galdeano and Joseba Beloki, and everyone else just hoping to survive. But watch out today for the big attack to come from Raimundas Rumsas, because he looks pretty good.
The king of the Tour de France for the past 3 years, and hoping to repeat matters by the time we get to Paris, now just a couple of days away. But it's not an easy road. When we conquer La Plagne today, we go back through the Alps again tomorrow, and it's a massive race tomorrow. Then of course we've got the undulations to Bourg-en-Bresse, and finally the finish in Paris via the time trial. This is the leader of the Tour de France today, as we now are in Macot, or Macot, as now it really begins to kick up. It's a narrow little village. In fact, last night Paul and I were so hungry at nearly 11 o'clock driving here, we were hoping we'd have found a restaurant open. What a forlorn hope that was. As we now see it in broad daylight, it looks a rather pleasant place, doesn't it?
It really does. It might look pretty nice place to us watching here from the comfortable position on the finish line, but it does not look like a nice place for these bike riders. In fact, to get there right now, I have to say that Michael Bogert has completely changed his pedaling action. The main group of the yellow jersey and all of the contenders going under the banner there of 20 kilometers to go to the finish. And this man right now has led the bike race, Phil, since kilometer 40, and we are now at kilometer 160. So he's now completely changed his pedaling action for the last 16 kilometers of today's stage.
Well, I think they're giving 5:15 at the crackling old radio down there at the moment at 20 kilometers to go, which sounds like it. And so in which case he is still riding clear of the field. I'm sure Adrie van Houwelinge is back up to tell him that he is still riding clear of the field. Now we switch to La Plagne. I don't know if you saw the mileage there, the kilometrage, 16 kilometers to go. Paul and I reckoned last night that between 16 and 18 was about 3 or 4 kilometers, because it certainly was more than 2 kilometers.
I think they must be Savoie kilometers, because in this area of France, maybe they just add on 10 or 20%, but it certainly did seem like an awful long way. He now faces inside of 16 kilometers, 10 miles uphill to the finish. And it really is a threatening climb for all of these bike riders, because it looms up above them, and all they have to do is just look up there and they realize what's in store. A tough day in the saddle.
Now in a few minutes time we'll see the first numbered bend, which should be number 18, as we start the climb up this mountain. And each one has a name, and it is a rather cruel thing. I don't know whether they've taken the idea from Alpe d'Huez, which had always had numbered hairpin bends. But here they've named everyone as well, and it just tells you how far you've got to climb. And if you're suffering, I wouldn't think you'd want to see that.
Stuart O'Grady just accelerating there. These guys, I would say, are just going to try and survive on this climb. The fight really has gone out of them after a long breakaway, a long chase behind this man Michael Bogert, who now has a very comfortable advantage of 5 minutes over the men in the middle and 7 minutes over the group containing Lance Armstrong. And I think most of the bike riders in today's race would prefer to be there right now.
Yes, well, I can't swim, so I certainly wouldn't be able to do very well in that race. But there they come down the rapids, while high above we're going to see the passage of the Tour de France. And this is the peloton now crossing over the Whitewater Rapids, as they will now be entering the town shortly for the climb. This is the chase group, and they don't look, Paul, as though they've got much fight in here.
Well, somebody has.
No, Stuart O'Grady is gone.
I can't believe it.
I don't know what's going on here today. He's inspired.
Unbelievable. Stuart O'Grady, the sprinter of the Tour de France, third overall in the green jersey points competition, has gone out on his own. But you know, this is not an attack to try and win the stage. This is just to ride the climb as comfortably as he can. But he is in an unbelievable day today, one that he will remember for a long time to come. Because for a sprinter to ride at the front on a mountain stage, that's a big thing.
It is, but I'm amazed he's staying away at this stage. We know he wants the green jersey points at the line, but this is something he's never been able to do before. But he's ready, maybe right today, because he's taken advantage of the in-battle in-house between the yellow and Beloki. Once those riders come to this mountain, they will push on all of the way. There's no question of that. But you've got to take your hat off to a man who's trying to get points on the mountain stage. And they're not as high, of course, as a points on the flat stages.
It's a tough climb, this, at 17.5 kilometers. The summit, 1,970 meters, 6,500 feet above sea level. The average gradient, well, just inside 7%. But you know what? The bottom part is the worst part of this climb, because I think the first 10 kilometers are probably around about 10% in places.
Good crowd all of the way up here. Laurent Jalabert sitting at the back for the moment. Miguel Martinez is setting the pace. Iban Mayo, I can't believe, will not want to chase down Stuart O'Grady, but maybe he's tired. This rider is blazing the trail and doing it so well at the moment. The gaps have gone to question marks now on Stuart O'Grady, but it's 5:17 to Laurent Jalabert, 7 minutes 16 to Lance